All right, we are coming into episode number 7, and Roger, we talked before about your time in the Navy, and one of the things that we forgot to cover is talking about coming out of the Depression and that piece in the war when rationing was common, and I think you had spent time at a grocery store and had quite a bit of experience with that.
Yes, we did have experience with that. One thing that I remember about those times is everybody seemed to be pulling the same way, and they were resilient. They tolerated what was put before them about rationing and everything else, but there wasn't a lot of fighting like there is today. I mean, they were all going after a common cause to end the war, and whatever it took to win the war, they were willing to do it, even if it meant sacrifice. Now, as far as rationing is concerned, we were operating in 2 fields of battle in Europe and Japan, and we had to supply all those soldiers with food. And in order to have enough food for the soldiers, we had to sacrifice some of our intake. And in order to do that, they said, well, let's have rationing. So they set up rationing boards, I think in each county, and they would give you your ration coupon books every month, and every person in a family was entitled to the same number of stamps in their ration books. And there was various types of stamps. There was red stamps for meat, and there was blue stamps for processed foods. There was stamps for butter and sugar and coffee, and you would pool all those stamps, and you'd have to decide, do we want to have butter, or do we want to have coffee, or do we want to have sugar? But it wasn't all that bad. We could tolerate it. Now, working in a grocery store, when people would come in and order groceries, it wasn't self-serve like it is now. The people would come up to the counter, and we had several of us standing behind the counter, and they'd say, well, I want a bar of Ivory soap. So you'd go all the way back to the soap department, bring the soap back, and then they say, I want a bottle of Tide, which is in the same area, but they didn't tell you. So you go all the way back to, and then you'd have all the stuff on the counter, and then you'd look at the stamp requirements. Like a can of peas might cost 16 points of processed foods. So they'd give you 20 stamps out of their blue book, and you'd give them tokens back, little wooden tokens, not red tokens because they were meat tokens. You'd give them blue tokens, and you'd give them 4 blue tokens. So that would be considered just like a stamp, only like paper money and coins. So you were going through 2 areas of transactions, money and stamps. And it was fairly complicated, but it taught us a lot about making change and doing figures and so on and so forth. And then when you were done with their order, they would say, well, I want to charge it. So then you'd have to take these little carbon paper books and write bar Ivory soap or Tides or whatever it was, and you'd put that in the register there for putting it on their account and so forth. Now, you also had gas rationing, and you had rationing for shoes. So when your shoes wore out, that's when you get back to what I told you in one of the previous episodes, where you'd go to the hardware store and buy some glue-on soles and prolong the life or the death of your shoes. Now, the farmers, they were raising food, of course, for the cause, and they would have an ample supply of gas. So the trick in high school was to find a friend who was the son of a farmer, because for some reason or other, the cars never differentiated between tractor gas and car gas. And there weren't diesel tractors, there were gas tractors. So my friend in high school had a 36 Chevy, and we never suffered too much for lack of gas, but we're plowing fields on the way to the movie theater. But it was quite something. But the people lived with it. And you'd have all your stamps accumulated. Now here's this one for butter, and this one is for sugar, and so on and so forth. And
so who was the keeper of the stamp books?
Mother, she took care of that.
But who did she get them from?
Well, you had to go to the rationing board. This was going from a vague memory. I think it was every month you went to the ration board and they would give you a new set of books.
And that was each county or each city had their own
Yes,
rationing
yes,
board?
yes. I think it was a county deal. It might have been a city deal, but they said there was 5,500 rationing boards in the country. So I don't know. That could have been counties because like we have 72 counties in our state and so forth. There was something I tried to remember. Everybody cooperated. Like in Cedarville, we had several people that drove to Manitowoc every day to work on submarines. My uncle, he was an electrician for submarines, so he helped. He probably wired the submarine that's still sitting in Manitowoc. So everybody pulled on the same rope in the same direction, and we didn't have all the bickering that we have nowadays because we wanted to get out of the war and get back to normal living. If you just think back, I mean, the auto companies practically overnight they switched to making tanks, and it's just amazing what they did. But they did it, and they made B-17s. They cranked one out practically every day, but everybody pulled on the same rope in the same direction. It was quite amazing.
You mentioned the rationing board. They also had draft boards as well, right?
Yes,
Was there? I remember hearing that there was occasionally some tension between who was on the draft board and who got drafted, and sometimes the
yes, and everybody, not everybody, there was a considerable number of people that are looking for deferments. And you could get a deferment by the fact that you had invalid parents that you had to take care of, or that you were doing a critical job like doing the wiring on a submarine. And of course, there was some people that were just plain every day, they didn't want any part of it. They'd either go to Canada or try to run away from the draft and not be drafted. But there was a lot of people like myself. I said, I didn't want to be drafted because I didn't want to be in the infantry. I wanted to be in something like an airplane or in some area where I could use some of my mind rather than my feet to do something. And my friend later on, he learned how to type in high school, and as a result of that, he got to be a clerk in an army office, and he stayed away from the front lines. I mean, little things like that.
was it a pretty much an assumption that most of your friends were going to be drafted? Was everybody
Oh
at
yes,
least asked to?
yes. And digressing a bit, I had a son later on who was going to be drafted for the Vietnam War. And he was born in 1950, and he had a draft number 6. Now, they went by numbers, and number 6 is pretty close to the top, but he had a deferment for going to college. But as soon as he got out of college, he would lose his school deferment and he would be in the service. So I remember I got a call from his girlfriend, or wife to be, father said, Raj, there's a period of time where you can withdraw your school deferment. And right now the Army has enough people, they aren't taking anybody into service. And if you withdraw your school deferment, you might be able to jump over that need to go into the service after you got out of school. So it was a Christmas vacation. I went to the draft board, did all the work, and exposed my son to the draft. That meant that with his number 6, he was going to be called up, but they didn't need any people during that period of time. And by that means, we avoided my son going to the Vietnam War, which was a very helpful thing at the time. So he
Yeah.
didn't have to go.
Talking about rationing and making do, and we talked about some of the things you did at home. Are there any of those habits or behaviors that you carry with you today from being saving every rubber
Oh yeah,
band?
you didn't throw anything away because it was going to cost you stamps, or it was going to cost you money, or it was costing you something that you didn't have. So you were there wasn't too much obesity in those days. I think even looking ahead to my college graduation picture, we were all skinny as a bone. We have been used to living on nothing. And to this day, I will rewash disposable plastic bags. And you do things like that. You take bent nails, straighten them, put them in a bottle. That was your nail supply. So you were really conservative, and those habits are go with you. I mean, I'm 99 years old and I'm still washing plastic bags.
So the person straightening the nails, were they the same person removing the nails?
In some cases, yes. Like I would take my orange crates apart with a claw hammer and bend the nails, and I'd straighten them and I'd put them in the bottle. And then when I wanted to build something, I would use those same nails to put it back together. So
Because I feel like there's a lot more care taken if you know you're going to be the one straightening them after you've
that's
opened
right.
them.
That's right. That's right.
What about ammunition? You had mentioned your BB gun.
Oh yes, when you had a full tube of BBs, they were a nickel a tube, and I don't know if there was 200 BBs in a tube. Might have been less than that. And when you were flush on ammunition, you would shoot into fence posts and draw a circle on it. That was your target. And then when you got down to no BBs, you'd go to the fence post and take a jackknife and dig those BBs out of the fence post, get some steel wool and polish them up, and you'd polish up a half a dozen or 10 BBs, and then you'd go to Grottenhouse's farm and sit there and wait for a dove to put his head over the edge of the barn, and you'd hopefully hit him and take the dove to Von Vasco, and he was another frugal Hollander. He would give me a nickel for every dove, and then I could take the nickel and go to the hardware store and buy a new tube of BBs and forget the fence post.
You had mentioned the flour sacks.
Oh yes, my mother baked bread. I think I told you that one of the previous episodes. She baked bread every Saturday, and we had homemade bread until I was going to get out of high school. And we'd get a 50-pound bag, I think it was 50-pound bag of Pillsbury flour, and we had a flour bin in the corner of the kitchen underneath the counter that had a vertical hinge on it, and you could swing it out, and it had a metal liner in the flour bin, and you take this thread that was interwoven, and if you knew how to do it, you could just zip it and take all the thread off, and then take the bag of flour and dump it in the flour bin, and you get a cloud of flour all over the place. And then we'd take the flour bag, sack, and bleach that, and that would be our dish towel, or I don't think they used it for diapers. I think it was dish towels, but we never threw anything away. So,
With all of that saving, is there one thing that you notice people refuse to go without, whether it be tobacco or caffeine or chocolate or sugar or anything like that? Did you see, was there one thing that everybody
well,
refused to give up?
they had with the ration, they hit just about everything else, and if people had a liking for butter, well, then they have to sacrifice a compatible item like a sugar or so. I think we had unique coupons for coffee, but I'm not sure of that. But you could make some decisions yourself. If you're going to live on coffee, you could sacrifice the use of sugar or butter or whatever it was. And I don't know how they handled the meat, if there was so many points per pound, regardless of what meat. But living in a rural community, there was quite often a pig that happened to get slaughtered. And we even canned meat in glass cur jars. So you'd happen to slaughter a pig on a farm and can that meat, so you'd have some meat that could bypass the stamp deal. You just make do on a lot of these things, and if you really are suffering, you'd find a way to go around it. But all in all, the people cooperated quite well.